A SEAL team was trapped, their comms failing, their hope bleeding out into the dust. They were completely surrounded. Then a single, impossible gunshot from miles away rewrote their fate in an instant. Kaelen Vance, to the few who spoke to her, was a ghost long before she ever picked up a rifle. At 30, with pale, ash-blonde hair braided loosely down her back and eyes the color of a storm-swept sea, she was a study in muted colors. Her official title at the sprawling Stonehaven Proving Grounds was Ballistics Calibration Technician. It was a title as bland and unassuming as the gray coverall she wore. Her domain was a cramped, oil-scented workshop filled with the skeletons of precision rifles and the silent hum of diagnostic equipment. She was the woman who made sure the tools of war worked. Nothing more. At least, that's what everyone believed. Master Sergeant Rex Thorne, a man built like a boulder with a personality to match, made her the butt of his jokes during morning briefings. Got our phantom tech in the back, Kay? He'd boom, a smirk playing on his lips. Make sure you polish those scopes real good. Wouldn't want a smudge to throw off my shot at 50 yards. The younger SEALs would chuckle, seeing only a quiet woman who seemed more comfortable with machines than people. They saw her methodically checking barrel harmonics, her slender fingers dancing over complex optics, and assumed she was just another cog in the vast military machine. They didn't see what her uncle, Chief Warrant Officer Elias Vance, saw. Elias, the base commander and the man who'd quietly secured her this position, watched her with a knowing, worried gaze. He saw how she never sat with her back to a door. He saw how her eyes, even in casual conversation, would instinctively scan rooftops and ridgelines. He once saw her pause mid-sentence, her head cocked, and murmur, "Ford F-250 diesel needs a new fan belt," a full minute before the truck rumbled into view. She didn't just see the world. She analyzed it, processed it, mapped it for threats. The new recruits learned, through some unspoken grapevine, that if your shot was pulling left in a crosswind, you didn't consult the manual. You went to Kay's workshop, offered her a hot coffee, and quietly asked for her opinion. She'd glance at the sky, feel the grit of the dust on her fingertips, and suggest an adjustment, a click or two on the scope, that was always unervingly perfect. She listened to the whisper of wind through the canyons and watched the heat haze shimmer off distant rocks, reading the environment like a language only she understood. One evening, Elias found a colleague staring at the firing range data with a baffled expression. "It's Vance's girl," the man said. "Every rifle she calibrates is dead on, but her methods, they're not in any field manual." Elias nodded, a flicker of pride and sorrow in his eyes. He walked over to the window, looking toward the small, brightly lit workshop where his niece was working late, as always. "That's because she's not just calibrating rifles," Elias said, his voice low. "I've seen the best of the best, but no one listens to the battlefield like Kay. She's having conversation with physics." Miles away, under a bruised purple sky, SEAL Team 7 was learning about physics the hard way. The rust-colored canyon was supposed to be a routine reconnaissance mission, a quick look at a suspected insurgent outpost. The intelligence was wrong, fatally wrong. The outpost wasn't an outpost. It was a kill box. At least 24 hostiles, armed with heavy machine guns, surveillance drones, and thermal optics, had been waiting for them. The ambush was brutally efficient. The team's 2 designated snipers were taken out in the first 30 seconds, their positions pinpointed with chilling accuracy. Pinned down in the rocky basin of the canyon, Team 7 was trapped. The enemy held the high ground on all sides, their muzzle flashes a deadly constellation in the encroaching darkness. Bullets chewed at the rocks around them, sending chips of stone flying like shrapnel. Viper 1 and Viper 2 are down. I repeat, both snipers are Kia, a voice screamed over the comms. "This is Bravo lead." Rex Thorne yelled into his handset, his face grim with dust and fury. "We are pinned. 0 Overwatch. Requesting immediate air support. Grid coordinate." The radio answered with a burst of static. The enemy was jamming them. Their ammunition was dwindling. Their medic was hit. Hope was a resource bleeding out faster than their medical supplies. Thorn could see the enemy maneuvering, their movements coordinated and professional, tightening the noose. A small, agile drone buzzed overhead, its red, "I am malevolent" star, feeding their positions back to the enemy gunners. They weren't just being attacked, they were being systematically dismantled. Back at Stonehaven, Kay was performing her final nightly checks. The main comms center was a hive of controlled chaos, but her small workshop was an oasis of quiet routine. She was wiping down a rifle stock when a sound crackled to life from an old, forgotten backup receiver on her bench, a frequency that was supposed to be used for administrative traffic only. It shouldn't have been able to pick up a scrambled, encrypted field transmission from 100 miles away, but somehow it did. Through the static, she heard it all. The ragged, desperate breathing, the sharp crack of incoming rounds, the strange shouts of men facing their own mortality, and a voice, raw with desperation, that she recognized instantly. It was Thorn. Anyone on this net. Bravo team is getting torn apart. The transmission died, replaced by the hiss of an empty channel. For a long moment, Kay stood frozen, the cleaning rag clutched in her hand. The sounds didn't just break the silence of her workshop. They broke something deep inside her. The static-laced pleas were a key turning a lock in the darkest room of her memory. Suddenly, she wasn't in her quiet workshop in the Highlands. She was back in the searing heat of the desert, on a mission codenamed Operation Crimson Sand. She could taste the metallic tang of fear and cordite, hear the screams of her teammates from Ghost Cell, her chosen family, as they were cut down in a trap born from bad intelligence. She had been their overwatch, their guardian angel, forced to watch them die one by one from a distance, her impossible shots only delaying the inevitable. She had been the sole survivor, a ghost left to haunt the world of the living. Her hands began to tremble, a violent tremor that rattled the rifle parts on her workbench. But beneath the tremor, a cold, hard resolve was crystallizing in her sea-gray eyes. The ghost was awakening. She didn't run to the command center. She didn't raise the alarm. Official channels were too slow, mired in procedure and permission slips. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that by the time a rescue was approved, there would be no one left to save. She walked with a steady, deliberate pace to the back of the workshop, to a plain, gray steel locker that no one ever touched. It wasn't standard issue. Her fingers, no longer trembling, flew across the combination lock, entering a sequence she hadn't used in 5 years. The lock clicked open. Inside, nestled in custom-molded foam, was not a standard issue weapon. It was the XM-21 Valkyrie. Its stock and barrel were finished in a matte, non-reflective coyote tan. It was a weapon that didn't officially exist, custom-built for a unit that had been erased from the records. It was an instrument of impossible precision, a tool for rewriting fate. It was a rifle. She didn't bother with body armor or a helmet. They were for soldiers who planned on being seen. She slid 3 magazines into the pockets of her coveralls, slung the Valkyrie over her shoulder, and slipped out of the workshop. She moved through the base like a wisp of smoke, melting into the shadows between the sodium lights, her footsteps making no sound. She disappeared into the darkness of the surrounding hills, a ghost on the hunt. The final scene was one of utter stillness. Miles from the firefight, on a high, windswept ridge no map had ever marked, Kaelen Vance lay prone, the Valkyrie resting on its bipod. She looked through the scope, her breathing slowing until it was as calm and steady as the earth beneath her. The first shot was not aimed to kill. It was aimed to blind. The bullet, traveling at over 2,800 feet per second, crossed miles of treacherous, wind-swept terrain and impacted the objective with surgical precision. Through his thermal scope, the enemy commander saw not the death of a seal, but the explosive spiderwebbing of his own optics as the high-velocity round turned them to dust. He staggered back, clutching his face, a disoriented shriek of pain and confusion ripping through the night. His ability to direct the assault was gone. Chaos erupted in the enemy ranks. Before they could recover, the second shot came. It didn't strike a man. it struck a machine. The bullet slammed into the feed tray of the heavy machine gun that had been pinning the SEALs down, mangling the mechanism and silencing its deadly chatter. The third shot was even more audacious. It punched through the thin metal casing of the drone operator's control unit, sending the device into a cascade of sparks and causing the drone overhead to tumble lifelessly from the sky. Down in the valley, the SEALs stared in stunned disbelief. The relentless storm of enemy fire had suddenly faltered, replaced by panicked shouts and sporadic, unaimed bursts. "Who the hell is shooting?" a young SEAL yelled. Then, a voice, calm and professional, cut through the auxiliary channel on Thorn's radio. It was a woman's voice, clear and steady. "Valkyrie is online, providing overwatch." Thorn's blood ran cold. Valkyrie? It wasn't an active call sign. It was a legend, a ghost story whispered by old-timers about a sniper from a defunct Black Ops unit who could make impossible shots. He didn't have time to question it. He saw his chance. "Bravo team, on me. Push to the west ridge. Go, go, go." As they moved, the symphony of destruction continued from the unseen position. Kae wasn't just a sniper. She was a conductor, and the battlefield was her orchestra. Each shot was a carefully chosen note designed for maximum tactical and psychological effect. A round would kick up just a foot in front of a rushing fighter, forcing him to dive for cover and breaking the momentum of their charge. Another would disable the engine block of a technical vehicle trying to reposition. She was hurting them, controlling them, dismantling their will to fight piece by piece. The enemy assault dissolved into a frantic, terrified retreat. They were being hunted by an invisible phantom who seemed to be everywhere at once. A phantom who didn't miss. They abandoned their heavy weapons, their wounded, and fled into the darkness from which they had come. In exactly 42 minutes, it was over. The canyon fell silent, the only sounds the wind and the ragged breathing of 7 surviving SEALs. They were battered, wounded but alive. Thorn keyed his mic, his voice filled with a reverence he had never felt before. "Valkyrie status?" The only reply was the soft hiss of static. The ghost had vanished as quickly as she had appeared. Back at Stonehaven, the engagement had not gone entirely unnoticed. A high-altitude surveillance drone had caught fragmented thermal imaging of the firefight. Elias Vance stared at the grainy footage on the screen in the command center, his heart pounding. The computer highlighted the SEAL's position, the enemy's, and a third, solitary heat signature on a ridge 3 miles away. A figure with no uniform, no standard gear, lying prone, as still as the rock it was pressed against. With a heavy heart and trembling fingers, Elias used his high-level clearance to unlock a file buried so deep in the server it was practically mythical. The file was designated Ghost Cell // Valkyrie. The name on the file was Kaelen Vance, sole survivor. The report detailed her impossible record, culminating in Operation Crimson Sand, where she had held off an enemy force for 18 hours to cover a failed extraction, watching her entire team die before she went dark. The next morning, Thorn found Kae in her workshop, methodically cleaning the XM-21 as if it were just another rifle in for routine service. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, the weight of his ignorance and arrogance crashing down on him. I used to laugh at you," he stammered, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought you were just maintenance." He took a step closer. "Last night, I heard those shots. I thought it was the sound of death coming for us. But I was wrong." He looked her in the eye. It was the sound of hope. Kae didn't look up. She simply slid a piece of paper across the workbench toward him. It was a map, hand-drawn with breathtaking detail, showing every contour, every wind channel, every hidden vantage point of the rust-colored canyon. Tactical points that no official GPS survey had ever recorded. "Next time," she said softly, "you need the high ground." Just then, Elias walked in, a classified folder in his hand. "We know, Kae," he said gently. "High Command knows. They want to reactivate your clearance. Full reinstatement. Your own unit." For the first time, Kae stopped her work. She slowly looked up, and for the first time since anyone could remember, she took off the protective safety glasses she always wore. Her eyes, unveiled, held a depth of distance and loss that silenced the room. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much from too far away. "I was Valkyrie," she said, her voice quiet but unbreakable. "Now I'm just a mechanic." She gestured to the rifles around them. "I fix the tools that save lives before tragedy strikes. That's enough for me now." Kae's decision sent ripples through Stonehaven that became a tidal wave. The culture began to shift. The machismo and bravado in the mess hall were replaced by quieter, more serious conversations about angles of fire, covering retreats, and protecting your teammates. The unofficial Valkyrie doctrine, the philosophy that a sniper's true measure was not in targets eliminated, but in lives preserved, began to spread from squad to squad. She refused the Medal of Honor. She didn't attend the ceremony held in her name. But the rocky ridge where she had made her stand became a hallowed, unmarked ground. Every SEAL graduating from advanced training would make a silent pilgrimage there, bowing their head in respect to the ghost who had watched over Team 7. Her legend grew, a modern myth whispered in classified debriefs and late-night conversations across the global special operations community. The unofficial motto of the training facility, once the aggressive death from above, was quietly painted over one night. In its place, in the same official font, were the words, "Life from the Shadows." One morning, the workshop was empty. Kae was gone. No transfer papers, no farewells. She had simply vanished. But on her workbench, carved carefully into the wood with the tip of a knife, was a final message. If you're still alive, you still have the chance to keep others alive too. Her methodology was eventually integrated into the highest levels of military training, though it was never attributed to her. It was taught not in classrooms, but through the grainy footage of 3 perfect world-changing shots and the stories of the men who were there. New soldiers who asked who Valkyrie was were simply told she was someone who wanted you to remember your purpose, not her name. The greatest heroes are not always the ones standing in the spotlight. Sometimes, they're the ones who become the shadows, so that everyone else has a chance to make it home. She fought for her comrades, not for credit. If you believe true heroes are the ones who work in the shadows, so others can see the light, share your thoughts below. And please, always comment with respect. For more stories that honor the unseen, subscribe and join our community.